All right, diving in. We're tackling something I know a lot of you are curious about, thinking in English. That internal monologue just flowing without the whole translation thing going on in your head.
Yeah, it's kind of the holy grail, isn't it?
Totally. And, you sent over this podcast, English Coffee Time.
Oh, yeah, John and Emily.
Right. They're great, so approachable, really make it feel less like, textbooky.
Definitely. And they really get that it's more than just like a study trick. It's a whole mindset.
Yeah, it's almost like once you can think in English, it unlocks this whole new level.
Fluency, confidence, even just like understanding the culture better. It's all
They
connected.
hit on that right away, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's about like the way you see the world, not just the words themselves.
Okay, so practically speaking, where do we even begin? I love how they start with this start small idea.
Oh, yeah. The cup example. I remember that.
Right. Just seeing a cup and in your head going, cup, not taza or whatever your word is.
Like deceptively simple.
But they say it's huge G for a reason, right?
It is. Think about it. You're skipping that translation step. You're making the connection in your brain object to the English word directly. It's like a shortcut.
So more of that we do, those pathways get stronger.
Exactly. It's like learning a new route. At first, you're all GPS and maps, then it's just automatic.
That makes sense. So it's not about complex sentences right away, just those building blocks.
Mm-hmm. And it ties into how habits form, too. Like little things repeated, your brain starts wiring itself that way.
Cool. So single words, then they take it to the next level, right? The mental conversations.
Oh, yeah, I like that one. Like picturing yourself ordering coffee, but in your head.
Emily gave that example, right? It's like mental rehearsal for the real thing.
Exactly. The more you do it, the less you'll hesitate when you actually have to speak.
Like practicing your lines before a play or something.
Yeah, it's all about building that fluency from the inside out.
So we've got the words, the mini dialogues, but what about tying that to the real world?
That's where describing your surroundings comes in. It was one of their tips, right?
Mm-hmm. They talk about like noticing the sky is blue, traffic's loud, that kind of thing.
It might seem basic, but there's more to it.
Is there? I'm curious.
You're using the language, but you're also engaging your senses. Like you're seeing that blue sky, hearing the traffic.
Oh, so it's more vivid, not just words on a page.
And it forces you to like actively search for the vocabulary to describe what's around you.
Expanding that mental word bank.
Exactly. Plus, you're making English part of your everyday experience, not just study time.
Cool. Okay, so we've got the sights, the sounds, but what about feelings?
Oh, they had a tip for that too. Using English to describe your emotions.
Right. Even just simple stuff. They gave the example of swapping out, like if you'd say ben üzgünüm, which is I'm sad in Turkish, just using I feel sad instead.
It's about more than just describing things. It's about connecting the language to your inner world.
It makes it personal, doesn't it?
Exactly. And that's huge. All right, you ready for the tough one?
Oh boy. Hit me with it.
This is the one even they admitted was hard. It's about avoiding translation altogether.
I knew it. This one makes me nervous. I feel like I always translate in my head.
It's a habit, but it's breakable. It's like, remember that route analogy? Now you got to ditch the GPS completely.
But what if I get lost?
You might at first, but eventually you'll navigate on your own, smoothly.
So how do we even start with that? It feels impossible.
John, he made a great comparison to music. Like you wouldn't translate sheet music before playing it.
You just read the notes.
Right, so think of English words like those notes, not translations of something else.
Okay, interesting. Start seeing them for what they are, not through that filter.
Mm-hmm. And this leads into another one of their points about thinking in English, even when you're learning new W words.
What do you mean? I'm intrigued.
Like say the word apple. Instead of thinking of your word for apple, picture a real apple in your mind.
Skip the word, go straight for the image. Why does that work?
Turns out there's like neuroscience behind it. When you have a strong mental image, especially one tied to your senses, your brain makes a stronger memory.
Whoa, so it's not just random, it's how we're wired.
Yep. It shows how actively engaging with the language is key, not just memorizing lists.
Yeah, okay, so we're building those direct associations, ditching the translator. But they're big on immersion too, right?
Oh, huge proponents of that. Like surrounding yourself with English as much as possible.
They even joked about listening to their podcast being part of it.
Of course. It's about getting used to the sound of English, even if you don't catch every word at first.
Training your ear, kind of.
Exactly. Soaking it all in. And then, this is where they got really bold. Speak to yourself out loud.
Oh man, I was wondering when that one was coming. I'm going to sound crazy, aren't I?
It might feel weird, but think about it. You're practicing pronunciation Getting comfy with your own voice, saying the words.
Taking those mental conversations we talked about, but out loud.
Yep. Bridging that gap between thinking and speak.
Makes sense, actually. So much of communication is more than just the words themselves, right? It's how we say them.
Totally. So don't be afraid to sound silly. Just get those words out there.
All right, so we've covered a lot here. Ditching the translator, picturing apples, chatting with ourselves. Anything else major from John and Emily before we move on?
Oh, there's more. They had a great analogy for thinking in English, and it's not what you'd expect. It's cooking.
Cooking. Like with food.
Yeah, they compared it to learning to cook. It sounds random, but it makes sense when you hear them out.
Okay, I'm all ears. Lay it on me.
So they said when you're first learning to cook, you're all about the recipe, right?
Yeah.
Translating each step.
Measuring everything carefully.
Exactly. But then, as you get more experience, something changes. You start to understand the ingredients, the techniques.
You can kind of feel it more.
Yeah, and you stop translating, you just create.
Wow, that's actually a really good analogy. It's like internalizing the rules so you can break free from them.
That's it. And that's what thinking in English is like. You move past those word-for-word translations and get a feel for how it all works together.
You develop that intuition.
Exactly. It's like you're no longer following a recipe. You're improvising, adding your own style.
So thinking in English is like becoming a master chef, but with language. I like it.
And that brings us back to that ultimate goal they mentioned, the dreaming in English.
Ah, yes, the dream. They made that sound so cool.
It's a powerful image, right? When the language is so ingrained, it's even in your subconscious.
But they were realistic about the journey too, right? Like this isn't going to happen after one day of picturing apples.
Oh, for sure. They emphasize consistency, effort. There's no magic spell.
But they gave us a lot of tools to work with, which is great.
Right, like celebrating those small wins. Remember, start small. Even labeling a cup is a victory.
It's all about momentum.
And then building on that with the
Yeah.
mental conversations, preparing for those real-life situations.
So it's step by step like those cooking skills. You don't start with souffle. You got to nail the basics first.
Exactly. And the more you do it, the more natural it becomes.
Practice, practice, practice.
But they also said it shouldn't feel like a chore, you know. Find ways to enjoy the process.
Yeah, that's key. If you hate doing something, you're less likely to stick with it.
So maybe it's watching a show you love in English, listening to music, whatever makes it fun for you.
So it's finding your own recipe for fluency.
I like that. Everyone's different.
And speaking of finding things you enjoy, they were huge GE on immersion, right?
Oh yeah, like surrounding yourself with English as much as you can.
Making it part of your everyday environment.
It's like creating a little English world for yourself.
They talked about changing your phone settings, listening to music while you're doing chores, even just labeling things around your house with sticky notes.
Little things make a difference.
It's about creating those opportunities for your brain to absorb the language.
And they said, it's not about understanding every single word at first. It's more about getting used to the sound, the rhythm.
Like training your ear.
Exactly. And then, remember that bold tip? The talking to yourself?
Oh yeah, that one. I'm still not sure about that one.
It sounds weird, but they swear by it.
I guess makes sense. It's like taking those mental conversations to the next level.
Getting comfortable saying the words out loud.
Do they have any tips for that? Like, what am I supposed to say?
They said, practice common phrases or even have those imaginary conversations out loud, like pretending you're ordering food or asking for directions.
So I'm basically putting on a one-man show for myself.
Pretty much. But it's all about practice.
And they said, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Oh, absolutely. Mistakes are part of learning.
Like in cooking, sometimes you burn something, but you learn from it.
Exactly. They actually called mistakes learning opportunities.
That's a good way to look at it.
It takes the pressure off.
And that's what they kept saying, right? This isn't a race, it's a journey.
Enjoy the process.
They had one final piece of advice that I really liked. It was about how learning to think in English is, well, it's not a destination, it's ongoing.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Exactly. And that really takes the pressure off, I think.
Yeah, it's not about reaching some perfect endpoint. It's about constantly growing and exploring.
And celebrating those milestones along the way.
No matter how small.
Exactly. Did you label a few things in English today? Awesome. Had a mini conversation with yourself. That's progress.
It keeps you motivated to keep going.
And they talked about finding joy in the process too, right?
Yes. It shouldn't feel like a chore.
Like we were saying before, find what works for you, what makes it fun.
And they also emphasize the importance of community.
Oh yeah, finding other people who are learning English.
It's about support, encouragement, having people to practice with.
They even suggested finding a language partner to have those mental conversations out loud together.
Takes the pressure off, makes it more fun.
And most importantly, they said, don't take yourself too seriously.
Have fun with it.
It's about enjoying the journey.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll wake up from a dream and realize you were thinking, feeling, dreaming, all in English.
That's the goal.
It's the magic of language learning.
So inspiring.
It's about connecting with the language on a deep level.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot here. Where does this leave our listener, the person who's trying to make this happen in their own life?
Well, they've heard the advice, they've got the tools, now it's time to take action.
Like with that cooking analogy, it's time to get in the kitchen and start experimenting.
Pick one tip that resonated with you and try it out today.
Don't wait, just start.
Even something small. Label a few things in your mind, whisper some phrases to yourself.
Celebrate those little victories.
Stay consistent.
And have fun with it.
Remember, it's a journey.
And you're not alone on this journey.
Find a community.
Find a language partner.
And most importantly, have fun.
So to our listener, we challenge you, pick one thing from today and give it a go.
Start small, be consistent, and most of all, enjoy the ride.
Who knows, maybe one day we'll hear about your dreams in English.
You got this.
Yeah, it's like finding your tribe, people who get the struggle and the excitement.
And even if you don't have that in person, like a language group or a partner, John and Emily had ideas for DIYing that immersion.
Oh, right. Using everyday stuff as, like, sneaky little lessons.
Like changing your phone's language or listening to music in English while you're cooking dinner.
They even said something about labeling stuff around your house with sticky notes, like a fridge window kind of thing.
It sounds silly, but it works. Like those little nudges throughout the day.
Making English unavoidable.
And that's what I liked about their whole approach. It's not about forcing it. It's more like setting up your world so it happens naturally.
Creating the right environment.
Like, planting a seed. You got to give it the right soil, sunlight, all that.
So consistency is like that sunlight for our brains. We need that exposure.
And remember, it's not about being perfect from day one.
Oh, definitely not. They were all about embracing mistakes, weren't they?
Big time. Like those moments when you totally flub it, they're actually good.
Good. How so?
They show you what needs work, right? Like, oh, I keep messing up that tense, or I can't remember that word.
It's information.
And John and Emily, they had the best way of putting it. Instead of mistakes, they called them learning opportunities.
I love that. It takes the pressure off.
It's a much better mindset.
Makes it feel less like failure, more like, hey, I'm figuring this out.
Exactly. And that's the thing about this whole journey, isn't it? It's ongoing. There's always more to learn.
Like they said, it's not the destination, it's the journey.
And it should be a fun one. So celebrate those little wins, those aha moments.
Like even if it's just, hey, I remembered that word today without looking it up.
Exactly. Or I understood that whole conversation in English.
Those are big deals.
And they keep you going, keep you excited about learning.
So where does all this leave us? We've unpacked John and Emily's advice. We've gone kind of deep into the how of thinking in English. What's our takeaway for the listener?
It's time to take all this and actually put it into practice. Like we were saying with the cooking thing, it's time to get in the kitchen.
No more just reading the recipe. It's time to make something.
Pick one thing, anything that clicked with you today, and commit to trying it.
Don't wait for the perfect moment. Just start.
Even if it's just for 5 minutes a day. Label some things in your mind. Talk to yourself in the mirror.
Whatever feels doable, but make it consistent.
You'll be amazed how much those little bits add up over time.
And remember, you don't have to do this alone. Find a community, a language partner, someone to share the journey with.
It makes it more fun, and you can support each other.
So to our listener, our challenge for you is simple. Take action. Today.
Pick one tip, put it into practice. You got this.
And who knows, maybe one day you'll be the one telling us about your dreams in English.
Happy learning, everyone.